Hello, everyone, and welcome to the OKC Latino Young Professionals Group for another live conversation. My name is Miriam Campos, and I'm so excited about today's topic and our guest. And please remember that we are always here for you to provide you with connections and resources that will hopefully benefit you personally, but also professionally. So feel free to send us any comments or anything you'd like us to talk about in the future. But today, I'm going to go ahead and bring in our guest, and I'm so excited to bring on Michelle Martell. How are you, Michelle?
I am doing well. How are you, Miriam?
Doing good. It's a beautiful day, and it's Hispanic Heritage Month.
Yay!
So, I do want to tell everyone that's watching, Michelle is the recruiting development manager at Mosaic Personnel. So we are going to learn a little bit more about what she does, and we're going to talk about, most importantly, what we're here for, our virtual interviewing tips. And so first, we're going to start off by Michelle telling us a little bit about yourself, so everyone can get to know you. So tell us where you're from and whatever you'd like to share about yourself.
Of course. Well, thank you so much for having me. First of all, I'm very honored to be here and to share some virtual tips with you guys. And a little bit about myself. So I am originally from South Texas, McAllen to be exact. It's really close to the border. And I actually spent the first 5 years in Mexico. So my family is from Monterrey. And so I lived there. Spanish was my first language, but I really call Texas home. I've been here in Oklahoma since I was 15. So honestly, I've been an Okie longer than I've been anything else, but I still, consider myself a Texas girl. And I went to OSU, graduated from there, and I also now have a 5-year-old son. His name is Oliver, and he is my world. But yeah, that's just a little bit.
What did you study at OSU?
So I went in for apparel design, and like any typical college student, that is not what I ended up with. So I went the business route. So I ended up with business management. And it was one of those things where at the time I didn't really have clear direction on what I wanted to do. But now it's helped me so much to see in what I do and working for a locally owned, like smaller organization, being able to tie in to the big picture, a lot of what I learned in school has become really applicable.
Awesome. I love hearing about that because we all started off with one thing and then led us into something else. So thank you for sharing
Yeah.
that. And I love how you say Monterrey, with that
Yeah.
lovely, beautiful accent.
Yeah.
So, Michelle, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about your professional role at Mosaic and what do you do there?
Of course. So, yeah, like you said, my title is Recruiting Development Manager. In simple terms, I'm a recruiter. That's what I spend the majority of my time doing. I focus more on engineering and accounting positions, but I also handle all of our training. And so, whenever we get any new recruiters on board, I do all of their initial training, getting them ramped up and set up to run their desk, and then also handling any ongoing trainings that we have for our recruiting team, and really just working on best practices for our business and for our team, and making sure that all of our people are, have all the tools and resources that they need to fully do their job well.
Well, I'm sure they're happy to have a friendly face, and a friendly person because I love your energy. And every time I talk to you, I'm always laughing and smiling. So I think they really would appreciate that. And we have someone that said that they're from Harlingen. Is
Oh, Harlingen! Yay!
Yeah. And so how did you get there? How did you get to where you are today? And the reason why I ask this is sometimes, people who are watching, they're different age groups, but it's always interesting to hear how you got into your role.
Yes, of course. So again, even out of college, it was like, oh, like real world, what now? And I started in like educational recruiting. And
Mm-hmm.
at some point, I did make the decision, like, I want to go into staffing. It just seemed really appealing to me and really interesting. And I actually started with another recruiting firm. And the way that I ended up at Mosaic, it was actually like knowing somebody who knew somebody.
Of course.
And actually, really, I love sharing that story because a lot of the times I tell candidates that finding your next job, a lot of the times it's in who you know. And so it truly was like a referral basis that ended up landing me the interview. And then from there, it was the moment that I interviewed here, I knew that I wanted this to call this place home. And luckily, they felt the same way.
That's awesome. Well, and I love that you bring that up because that has been probably my life story of, you know, who I know has always had an impact in my job and whatever role that I've taken on. So I love that you shared that. It is
Yeah.
definitely about who you know and getting your foot in the door.
Yeah.
And you got some fans here, Michelle. Way to go, Michelle. Um, and so now that we've kind of learned a little bit about you, and of course, if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the comments. But let's move into the virtual interviews now, and you
Yay.
know, so that people can gain a little information today. I know a lot of things have changed. You know, the pandemic has thrown an entire twist on the normal life of interviews, and so
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of interesting stories as far as you know what some people have dealt with as far as them interviewing people, but also interviewees. So
Mhm.
you know, let's just jump right into this and tell us why you think this whole conversation is going to be important for people today.
It's so important. The majority of our clients right now are either starting out or solely doing virtual interviews. We have had major organizations who have made director level hiring and never met the person in person. It's all done via Zoom. And so I've really taken a focus to one, I like to prep candidates, and I'll probably use the term candidates, but really anybody interviewing for any capacity. I know that we talked about, if you're applying for a scholarship, or I did the Miss Hispanic Scholarship pageant at OSU, and that was my first time that I had to go out and buy a blazer and present myself in a professional manner. And so for anybody, being able to show that you're adaptable and having those tools readily available. The main thing with virtual interviewing is you want to make it seamless, just like if you were sitting in that room with them, sitting at a table. And so I would love to be able to be a resource for those little things that people might not think of, when it comes time to actually do it live.
Absolutely. And I can't agree more as far as, you know, we have a few pageants going on right now in the community.
Yeah.
And so absolutely. And even if you're a new business owner thinking about launching yourself, you're going to have to get in front of investors and, you know, pitch your idea. So this is not just for a job interview, but it's for anything that you have to do to get in front of someone. So super excited about this. So, all right, let's get started. What do we need to wear to these virtual interviews?
What you would wear in person. And so I always say you want to go business professional. And so, and again, my opinion would be it's always better to be a little bit overdressed than underdressed, especially, and you're going to know, the type of organization or who you're going to be talking to. So for the ladies, I would say, you want to have on a nice blouse. If you have like a blazer or a jacket, wear something like that. For the gentlemen, at least a button up. I always like to add on a tie. And then, of course, if you're getting really professional, you want to add on the jacket on top of that. Another pointer is from head to toe. Don't think that just because you're at home, you're okay with having on your leggings on the bottom or your comfies or anything like that. We've had it happen where we had a candidate who was doing an interview just like this, and I guess like his dog kept going in the background, and he got up and there were no pants on the bottom. And so that's why I tell people, like, you might think that it's just funny, but like, you want to be prepared just in case the doorbell rings or something happens and you have to get up, and now all of a sudden you're in full display. So you're ready. Put some slacks on.
That is so true. Oh my goodness. And I think, yeah, you may think like you don't need to, but then all of a sudden you forget and then you walk over.
Yes.
Well, and so, okay, so you're pretty much, from here you can see yourself. What about their hair? Because I know that this has come up a few times. So tell us about those, because I know I have some thoughts about that.
Yes. So I would say whatever accessory you have on, whatever you decide to do with your hair, like fix it and then commit to it. I can see the comment. I just can't see who said it. But like for the ladies, I've interviewed ladies before who have their hair and then they like keep like flipping with it, or you can tell that like they don't like that it's down and almost like they want to wear it up. But it's like, I'd rather you just be uncomfortable for a minute and like let your hair be, because it's very distracting, not only to the person that you're speaking to, but to yourself. If you're so concerned with what your hair is going on, or like if you're like if your bracelets are like jingle jangling all over the place, like you don't want to be too distracting with what you have on.
That's so true. I do have to mention this because we really think that it's common sense, right? But it's not common sense. Like someone said, it's like it may not be as common. So I did hear of a friend that commented that she just did a virtual interview, and the young person that was on the opposite side had their hair like all to the side, and kind of you could just tell that there was no effort. So although you may not think it's important, regardless of the position, the person who is interviewing you is watching that. So it doesn't have to be perfect, right? It just needs to be clean.
Exactly. Like you want to, would you go, to Target like that? Like would you go walk outside your house? And even, I mean, we were working from home and like it's easy, as women to be like, oh, I don't want to, put on makeup, like do my face. But for these things, like you want to put your best foot forward and you want to be presentable, and not to say that you won't be beautiful without makeup, but you just want to present your best self.
Absolutely. And hi, Dora. I can see you there. Thanks for joining us. Please tell us if you all have had these situations. I'm interested to hear. Okay, so we got to make sure we look presentable. All right, we feel good, and I think that's another common thing. How you feel or how you dress is how you feel. So if I feel like I'm not too excited about my hair, then that's probably going to come across. But in this world, okay, so of technology and virtual, interviews, let's talk about the software and what kind of things we need to be prepared for, because I know we've talked a little bit about those issues. So let's talk about
that is such an important topic. And so one thing, I think the first step would be confirm what the software is that's going to be used. And so there's multiple platforms now. And so is it going to be Zoom? Is it going to be Google Meets? Is it going to be Skype? Make sure that you comprehend like what's going to be used. Make sure that you have, if it's going to be, are they going to send you a link and all you have to do is click on that link? Okay. Do you have to download the app? Is it going to be working? Are you going to use your phone? Are you going to use your laptop? Now, once you have that figured out, like what software and what you're going to use it on, then test it out like way prior to the time that you're going to be meeting with this person. Not 5 minutes, not 10 minutes. I would test it out the day before. I would test it like the morning of. Make sure that your audio is good. Make sure that your video is working. Again, countless times where I'm sitting on Zoom, I'm waiting for someone, and they're having technical difficulties. Either they didn't realize they had to download the software, or their audio isn't working, or, and that's the thing, if you hear, like maybe you've never heard of Zoom before. Well, when they say it on the phone, don't be ashamed to be like, hey, okay, well, is that something I download? Is that, clarify, ask those questions to make sure that you're going to be prepared and ready to go. So that, because if you do it 5 minutes before and it's not working, now your anxiety level's up, now you're flustered, now you're not going to be able to put your best foot forward because you're freaking out about the software.
That is so true. I hope you guys are taking notes because this is really helpful information. I can't tell you how many times, I've learned, and that's the thing. You have to know that we've all had those trials and errors, and even with these conversations, things happen, softwares change, and so there may be internet issues where all of a sudden something disconnects. So that is super important. And the minute that you may be joining, it says software update. So
right.
you have to be prepared for that. That it's not right when you're about to jump on this meeting. And even more recently, there's a lot of conferences where you have to join and be ready in the waiting room and stuff like that. So yeah, absolutely. Check on the software.
And that brought up so 2 thoughts really quickly.
Yeah.
One, have a backup plan. So let's say if you're scheduled to meet at 3:00 and now it's 3:05 and you're having problems, pick up the phone and call them. Don't let them think that you're calling a no-show. Again, you want to be like, hey, I'm a professional. I know that this is going on. I'm on top of this. And then 2, on the virtual piece, if you are, joining, like maybe you're doing some sort of interview and there's like multiple people, like be very aware if your camera is on, if you're muted or not, because that could get really tricky too.
That is so true. So write it down, have a backup plan, and make sure that you are ready. All right. And you talked a little bit about also being mindful of like different things that are happening in your house. So let's talk about those things that you were mentioning about lighting, ceiling, background noises.
Of course. So another one that I think that a lot of the times, because a lot of us are at home, we get a little comfortable and we lose sight of those things. So one of the things that I am hearing phones go off during interviews more than I ever have. And I think it's just because, hey, I'm at home, I'm not in the office, I don't need to have it on silent. But again, you will need to be on your A game. So if you're in an interview or you're going in a meeting or you have a presentation, you want to, make sure that your phone is on silent. Now, if you forgot and it dings, 1, immediately put it on silent. Don't let that ding again. 2, apologize. You want to be very apologetic to that person for that happening. Mm-hmm. Then it goes into like your background, your lighting. 1, lighting is very, very important. So at least turn your lights on in the room. My preference, I always tell people, so like right now, there's a window right here to my left. And so it's giving some good, I have like the light in the room and I have some good natural light coming in. Never sit where the window is behind you because it'll just create like a weird glare and shadow, and you will essentially be the shadow. And so they won't be able to see you very well. Be mindful of like, if you have a ceiling fan on, I would just turn it off, because on this end, like as the person interviewing, like you just kind of like see the fan going, Again, it can be a little distracting. So you just want to be able to like limit those distractions. Another thing, with if you're on your laptop or your computer, like I think Medium and I right now, good examples, like you want to have, I would say like rule of thumb, at least from here up, show yourself,
Yeah.
like we don't need to see like your neck like from down here, or like just like from your nose up, which I've seen all of those things. I know it can get tricky, but like mess around with it. You want them to be able to see a good snapshot of who you are. If it's going to be on your phone and you don't have a like phone stand for it, then do your best to kind of prop it up, the best way that you can. I've had people who, like you can tell that they're just holding it, because then it's like they're going everywhere. And so you're just kind of like following them. And so you don't want the video like following you as you go. You want it to just be like steady. Again, thinking, I'm just sitting across the room for this person and we're having a conversation.
Mm. And also, I think it shows a little bit of effort that you're putting behind it to be ready and to be prepared, because you don't want the interviewing person to be worried about your background. You want them to be worried about you and what you're saying. So I absolutely agree. You have to be ready. And I know you said the being on the camera. I think it takes a lot of attention. If I'm on the camera and I can't see you, it's gonna have me so focused on trying to figure out what's going on than
Yes.
the actual candidate. And I've even noticed it with these kids, going to school and virtual interviews, that some of these poor kids, you can barely see their.
I do think my son had that problem. They had grandparents day, and my stepmom was like, I only saw his little curls on the top. And I was like, oh no.
Yeah.
That's a good kids, spouses, anybody else that might be in the house with you. That's another thing that you want to think about and prep if you are having an interview, or if you have an important meeting, or if you're pitching an idea. Get your spouse to be like, hey, for the next hour, I need you to make sure that the kids don't come in. Now, kids are kids, and I think that right now, everybody's being flexible. Everybody understands the world that we're living in. But again, let's say if your kid just comes in, like my son Oliver, if I'm doing an interview from home, he loves to jump in and say hi to my candidates. For the most part, they're pretty understanding. Sorry. But again, like if your kiddo comes up, you want to just like address it, maybe make a little joke, and then again, like be apologetic. If the position, if you're interviewing for a position that will be remote and it's going to be work from home, maybe I would even add something to the effect of, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, but I can guarantee that I will have childcare covered, for this position. Or you want to be able to kind of solidify that if I'm working from home, I will be able to fully be present in my job, and not just have like the constant distraction.
Very good points. Sometimes we don't think about those things. And
Yes.
so, yeah, super important, because I know there's times you have to make an announcement. I'm going live. Please don't come yelling. It happens. It happens. But how important is it for us? Okay, we've talked about our hair and what we look, but what about our posture? How much does that have to do with it?
Yes. So I am like a really big believer in like how we present ourselves and how we carry ourselves is going to have so much to do with how it comes across. And so, I mean, start out, sitting up straight, sit up on your chair, have good posture, project your voice, because if you're going to be like really quiet and not, it's that you're not going to be able to hear it. You're on a video. So you want to be able to like be mindful of your tone, be mindful of your facial expressions. Sometimes I tell candidates, the way that I prep them is, if you're just sitting there, like not giving much, I'm going to be like, oh my gosh, did it freeze? Like, are they still there? Can they hear me? So you want to be like responsive. You want to do the same thing you would in person. You want to be like nodding your head, going along with the conversation. Now, if let's say that you're going to be taking notes while you're in the interview, again, I would say, oh my gosh, if you don't mind, I'm going to take down some notes real quick. Because if you just start like looking down, again, it's going to be like, one, you're going to appear like completely disinterested.
Yeah. They think you're on your cell phone.
Yeah. So you want to be able to say those things, but yeah, like be mindful. Like and I've had to just I'll sit on my couch and we'll do Zoom calls for work or for interviews. But again, I'm not going to be like sitting back, like relaxed, like on my couch. Like I'm going to like prop the pillow up. I'm going to be like ready to go and presentable.
So we can't lean back like a cholo, You can do it after you get the job, right?
After you can celebrate.
Well, you like you said, I think that's super important for everyone to acknowledge. Get a chair that you're comfortable in, because I myself, there's been times where I'm like, oh, this chair is so uncomfortable. And the whole time I'm just like holding on for dear life. But if you get a pillow or something, adjust it before your time, because then you're fidgeting and then, it's moving. And then again, right, like you're not focused.
Well, and always try it out prior to. Sorry, thanks, Kurt.
Awesome advice.
Yes, I got distracted. Just try it out. So like if it's on your phone, be like, okay, what am I going to look at? Like make sure that you're centered, like don't be like off on one side. And then another really big one is like if you are on a table, like don't be, like listening to them and you're just over here like hanging out. Like get your hands away from your face. First of all, COVID. And second, not professional. Like you wouldn't be doing that in an actual interview. So don't get that relaxed. That's another, I'll just add that like side note. Some interviews are going to be very conversational in nature. Other interviews are going to be very formal. They're going to be very like HR questions or very technical questions. And every person that interviews is going to be very different. But if it is very conversational and very relaxed, don't get too relaxed. I think a lot of the times once we start getting like too relaxed, people start oversharing things that they shouldn't be sharing. And so just be mindful, like we're being relaxed but professional with the context of a professional interview or conversation.
We're still, like you're still in an interview, even if we're doing it virtually, you're still being, evaluated.
Exactly. Even if you think, because I interview people all the time that I'm like, oh my gosh, we could be friends. And I'm sure that we could, but I'm still interviewing them for a position, like we still have to get that job done.
That's right. So tell me about, what do you mean when you say having positive energy on an interview? What does that look like?
Yes. I think it's that like putting your best self forward. And I know that I'm an extrovert, so I feel like for me, I'm like, it might come a little bit easier, but it's smiling, it's making eye contact the best that you can via virtual, but it's being responsive, like being engaged. If you have to kind of like hype yourself up a little bit, before you do it, do so. Like put on a good song that's going to amp you up, that's going to make you have good energy. we've had candidates who are very, they have the skills needed for the position, but don't get the job because they're monotone, because they didn't bring any energy, because they didn't show any personality. So you want to be able, I always think of when you're interviewing, you're yourself, but like one notch up, like you're like your extra self, like you're just giving a little bit more energy and just bringing like your best self to the meeting.
I love that because, you know, you can find tips even from, so again, doing your homework, but like if I'm here with Michelle, I'm gonna look at, maybe I notice something. Maybe I just say, wow, I love your necklace, but we could easily talk about if you don't have anything to talk about at that moment, you can if you see something on the screen, but you can easily adapt to what your surroundings are. But if you do your homework, you can say, "Hey, I read that you said this, or you're doing X, Y, and Z, and you're already prepared." So you have topics just in case there isn't something to talk about, maybe while you're waiting,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think that that's also like a fine line too. If you are the person interviewing people, you want to lead that interview, so you want to be able to have those questions, have like transition topics, sometimes it can get kind of awkward to just go from question to question, so you want to be able to create that conversation. But then if you're being the one interviewed, you want to let that person lead, because I think that even if you're interviewing for a leadership position, part of being a good leader is also knowing when to step back and let someone else, lead. And so that's a fine line,
I guess a double snap there.
but yeah, because I've had candidates where as soon as we either get on the phone call or on the video, and they just take over, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'll just hang back, so you want to be able to have that a good mixture. And something else I thought of, not so much for virtual, but let's say that your virtual interview, you're having Wi-Fi difficulties or it's not going to work out. And so now you have your backup plan is to do it via phone. At that point, I would get up and walk around, because that keeps your energy up. If you're just sitting down, maybe you're going to start getting too comfortable. The tone of your voice you're going to notice that. Even if you're on the phone, walk around, go in front of a mirror and look at yourself smiling. You can hear a smile on the other end of the phone, just like you can tell when someone answers the phone and they don't want to be answering the phone, So that would be another advice. If you're in the job market, be mindful of how you're answering the phone, like how you're doing all those little things, because that's when the interview starts.
And I know you do a few different tips on your LinkedIn page. And I know I heard you say that where, providing your full name, understanding that when somebody calls you, you need to be aware of that could be your future employer. So you don't want to answer like, who is this, or angry or like, why are you bothering me? But
don't do that. But people do. I mean, I call people and I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. Like, clearly this is a bad time, and be listening, to who it is on that other line. But yeah, I mean, again, really quick. Sorry, I'm here. If they are calling you, I pick up the phone and I'm like, hi, this is Michelle. If I'm calling them and I'm leaving a voicemail, or even if they're answering, hey, this is Michelle Martell. You had reached out to me about such and such topic. If I'm leaving a voicemail, feel free to give me a call back. I'm going to be available this afternoon from 4 to 5. Tomorrow you can reach me from 10 to 11. You want to be clear. You want to set those expectations. If you want them to give you a call back, make it easy for them and never assume, like, I'm not going to assume that I'm the only Michelle that's calling somebody because they might have talked to 5 other Michelles that day, and so you want to always leave your full name.
Absolutely. And I think for some of you that are on this group that maybe are, business owners, these are tips that you can use whenever you're looking for new employees and also teaching your staff. Like, maybe you're not the one that interviews, but your staff is. And, uh, I think one of the other tips that I think you're going to go over a little bit is having questions ready. And, if you're being interviewed, preparing and showing them that you have learned about that specific position. I know that there's often times where it's like, what exactly am I going to be doing? And so
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about how to better prepare with questions.
Yes. So always, always have questions. Never go into an interview because here's the thing, they're always going to ask you, do you have any questions for us? And like, if you're watching, I hope that you never respond with, nope, I think we covered everything. Like, even if they covered everything, even if you know everything there is to know about that position, you still want to have questions for them because it shows that you did your homework. It shows that you're interested in them as a company. It shows that you are like eager and wanting to learn new things. And so I always tell people, have about 3 to 5 questions that you're going to actually ask. And that means you may want to have 10 to 15 questions prepared. I always say, write them out, have them ready. Don't just think that you're going to memorize them. Like, it's okay if you have them sitting in front of you. Take a portfolio with you, take a notebook. If you're at home and you're in a virtual, well, we are doing virtual interviews, then just have it sitting right there in front of you. Some 3 topics that I would say is, ask them something about the position. So whether maybe it's, who is this going to be reporting to? What's going to be the expectations of me? What will my first 30, 60, 90 days look like in this position? Ask them something about them. So maybe do a little LinkedIn creeping before the interview and be like, I've noticed with the company for 5 years. What do you like most about working here? Or how did you end up in the position that you're in now? If they're going to be your manager, your supervisor, say, what's your leadership style like? What can I expect from our working relationship? And then the third one would be, ask something about the company. Do your research. They are going to brag about themselves on their website. So if they do community service, if they've won awards, if they're doing stuff in the community, it's going to be on there. Do your research. First of all, know what they do. Know what they do, and then go the extra mile and be like, I saw that you volunteered at Regional Food Bank. Do you do that regularly? Or, just again, show that you are interested and that you've actually gone there prior to meeting with them.
Absolutely. And I think on that part, I have to say 2 things from that is that if you're passionate about something specific that you want to see in this company, for example, if you are interested in making sure there is diversity and inclusion, there is, opportunity for growth, or, intentional reaching out to specific minorities. And so if you are aware of that, or if that's important to you, you can ask those questions of, what are you doing to have some mobility in this area, in that area? Because you need to know that is your position going to have an opportunity to move up, or is it not? And so that's right. That's an opportunity for you. And then 2, if you do some of the LinkedIn creeping, You might just find that you have something in common, whether they went to your, university, or they just were in a leadership class that you were, and then now you have something to talk about. You can say, "Oh, so I saw that you were also a, you know, a graduate of this leadership program, and I was in it as well." And so now you have something familiar to talk
Yeah,
about that they're going to be like, wow, it shows that you did that little extra effort. So,
absolutely. Yeah, no, those are great points. I mean, I think with like the diversity and inclusion piece, if that's something that's really important to you, then ask questions that are going to be pertaining to that, because you will be able to really quickly find out if that organization really is diverse and inclusive, or if they just, put it on, because it's everybody's doing it right now.
yeah,
Go on there and do your research on that end. Or maybe, are they open to you coming in and being that person that's going to take them to that level and create, an IND program. If you're looking for growth, like if you want to be a manager in 3 years, ask questions. Like, you're going to find out, like, a lot of people, when I ask them what's important in their to them in a company, work-life balance and culture are the top two things that people talk about. I think that culture can probably mean a lot of things to different people. There's obviously a lot of different cultures. But if you want a work-life balance, and let's say that you interviewed at 5, we're flexible with you because after you got off of work, and you leave there, at 6:30, and everybody is still there, you're probably going to be there until 6:30 every day, and so those are things that you want to. I think one of our points is you are interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you, and so know what you're looking for in a company, because if you don't know what you're looking for, you won't know when you find it, and you won't be able to recognize the red flags when they're flashing right in front of you. And so just because that opportunity is there doesn't mean it'll be the right one. It might be the right one for somebody else, but you need to know ahead of time what's important to you in an organization.
I love that, because if you find out as you're going that it's not exactly what you're, wanting to step into, then that's a good place. It's okay. It's okay for it to not be the right position for you. But at least you figure it out during that interview, and it's absolutely okay to be ready for those questions. And
Yeah.
I want you to cover on two different things. Is it okay? One, you said, oversharing, and tell us what that means. Like, give us an example of that, because I know that it happens a lot. You and I have both seen that. And then also, tell us about, is it okay to talk about financial expectations during the first interview, or when is it appropriate?
Yes, very good questions. So, for sharing, getting, and that's like where it's like so hard, like, where is the line drawn?
Right.
It can be, I hear it all the time where people are, I don't want to say anything negative about my last employer, but let me tell you all about what they did wrong. That's oversharing. You don't want to go out and start saying everything bad about them, because your character is the one that is being, evaluated here, for lack of a better word. And so you want to remain with integrity regardless of what your employer did. Um, like, I'm a single mom. And so I don't want to go in somewhere and, talk about, like, exes or situations that you may have, or whatever, like, struggle that you may be going through. That's not something, I've had people do this. And that's why I say, like, they'll talk about their ex, they'll talk about, a difficult divorce that they're going through. And I don't want to take away from people's struggles, because we all have so many areas that is going on in our life.
Right.
But in that moment, it's not the place to share it. And the reason being, you don't want that to cloud over your skill set. Why you're there, to good employee. You want to be able to, again, just shine your best light without going into too many details of, any bad experiences, and never talk bad about someone, talk bad about a customer, talk bad about, a company, because that'll only look bad on you.
That's absolutely right. And I think, again, a good way kind of to stay safe in that part is just listen to the question and make sure you're staying within that question, and
Absolutely.
sometimes they'll throw out there a question that's a little open, but you do have to be careful and just going too personal in these moments when you're first getting in there. If it's not an official interview, then it might be safer, but just be ready for,
Well,
that
and
professionalism line.
that's another thing too, is because I am a recruiter, I have a lot of candidates that will say this to me. Well, I'm going to tell you, but I wouldn't say this in a real interview. One, this is a real interview. And two, you will absolutely also say it in the real interview. Like, we are creatures of habit, and again, I've just had that experience where people, whatever they, the conversations that lead with us will end up happening with our client interviews. And again, in keeping with that relationship building, just as you're meeting with a recruiter, doesn't mean that's not a real interview. It doesn't mean that you don't want to put your best foot forward. And so you want to treat everything with professionalism. And that kind of ties into the financial piece. So, super important one. I think, it's the reason why we're working. We need to make a living, but people get so scared to answer that question. My advice to people always is, and what I ask them is always, what's your desired, what's your least acceptable? Because we all have a least acceptable. And so when I ask people that, sometimes they say, oh, well, I'm flexible. And so I'm like, oh, okay. And so then I'll throw out a number and they're like, oh, well, that's too low. I'm like, well, I thought you said you were flexible, So you want to have a range in mind. If you have your range and you stick to it because you know the job market, you know that position, you know what you need, you know what's going to make you comfortable. It's like knowing your worth. Then you stick to that, and you're going to land in something that's going to fit within that. If you get something more than that, great. A lot of people, I think, are fearful of, well, I'm going to say a number that's too high for the position. Okay, well, if your minimum is too high for what they're offering, then are you going to be able to make a living with what they're offering if it's lower than what you're needing? Then we move on to the next opportunity. Like, it's you need to be able to be comfortable with that range. I always ask the salary question, in the first interview because I'm a recruiter. The main reason why I ask it is, one, I want to be able to know that we're in the ballpark for whatever position we're working on. Because here's the thing. Companies already have their range. They have their budget. They know what they're going to be paying for that position. So either you fit into that range or you don't. But approach it with confidence. And if anything, ask people around you and practice having those conversations so that it's not awkward and so that you don't end up with something less, than what you're wanting. But I would also, sometimes when you're dealing with the companies directly, those conversations don't happen in the first interview. They're going to happen a little bit later on. And so you want to be careful that you're not just coming in hot with the money question, and turning them off a little bit.
I really love that feedback. I definitely think that, like you said, know your worth, because if you are, I think there's different scenarios for this. You can be an early, fresh, starting out where it's maybe some of your first jobs. And so you're going to be more excited about just getting the role. And so you might be a little more flexible. But if you are already invested in your profession, you have a few degrees in mind, you have experience, you know what you're coming for. I think that you need to be prepared, but also when you throw out, if the opportunity presents itself, to talk about the financial piece, super important for you to have your why behind it ready. Because if you're just like, well, I just want to get paid this because that's what I heard was good, then
Right.
you're going to be turned down real quick.
Right. Exactly. Because again, that's where you're backing it up. It's not just I'm asking for this amount just because it sounded good to me. It's no, I'm degreed. I have this many years of experience. Just like when you're starting out in your career, um, being mindful of that too, because I'll interview like recent college grads and then they'll throw out this like crazy number. And I'm like, whoa, me too. Like, and so it's like you want to be able to be very mindful of like where you're at in your career, where is the market as well. We deal a lot right now, unfortunately, with oil and gas candidates. And we all know oil and gas pays really, really well for a reason. And so when you're transferring those skill sets and putting them into another industry, they're not going to pay you what you were making in this other industry that's known for paying really well. And so having those realistic expectations is really important.
Absolutely. Love it. So do your homework and be ready, because if you can sell yourself, there are times where you can negotiate your salary, and you can negotiate maybe benefits or other things that come with it. So just
Absolutely.
be prepared. Um,
Yes.
if you want X, Y, and Z first, you need some vacation time before, like someone like me, I love to travel. You need to know what are your things that you're willing to settle for, and what are the things you're not.
What are
Uh,
your deal breakers? Yeah.
yes, love it,
Yes.
love it, love it, love it. Well, we've gotten a lot of really good information about virtual tips. Um, but and I wanted just to say this really quick. You're always being interviewed. So whether they say, if it was still going out to lunch type of thing, or they're just calling you to set up a meeting, you're always being interviewed. They're always watching what you're doing. They're going to look at, your social media unofficially.
Yes.
So just be aware of that. But now, I know we're celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month, so I
Yes.
can't go without acknowledging that. So I want to talk a little bit about that and see what your thoughts are. Why is Hispanic heritage important to you?
Uh, it's important, I think, because of that, because of Hispanic heritage. I think, as a Mexican American woman, it's important to keep the culture alive. Because even though, I spent the first few years of my life in Mexico and Spanish was my first language, I am 100% American as I have 100% Mexican blood in me. And so it is a daily journey to be able to represent both of those things equally in my life, in the way that I carry myself, in our culture, and what I'm teaching my son. And a lot of that is in the heritage, in our values, in our culture, in what we eat and what we listen to. So much of that, is just rooted in so much tradition. And so I think it's beautiful. It's important to be able to carry that on, especially to future generations. And I think that right now, the climate that we're living in, I think that a lot of people are just very open and wanting to learn and why and what is the difference. And so I think even being able to share and educate all of the differences that we all have as Hispanics and Latinos, that we all come from different countries, and some of us may speak Spanish and some of us may not, but it doesn't take away from us being able to celebrate and come together.
Absolutely. And I think even in the topic of virtual interviews, we understand there are still so many barriers, and there's still so many, you know, we still have to come a long way as far as, getting in positions of leadership. And so we are trying to provide resources to you in this group as well, so that we can get to the next level, so that we can compete with other candidates that maybe don't look like us, but it doesn't mean that we cannot bring to the table the same work ethic. I think that's the biggest thing that we can celebrate from Heritage is we contribute a lot to this country, but most importantly, we work hard. We are
Mhm.
some of the hardest working people, and there's a lot of Latinos that have helped make our country what it is. But I definitely feel like it's a great time to celebrate and highlight those efforts. So you as well, Latina, doing the work that you do to get people in positions that are so necessary. So we also celebrate you, and yeah, and we want to empower other Latinas and Latinos, Latinxes, whatever you want to call yourself, to
Yes,
celebrate the beautiful, rich culture that we have in our country, in our city. And then to wrap up, Michelle, what are
yes,
the last three things that you want to leave with the group today?
yes. So, three top things I would say is be professional, like we talked about, from your dress, from your tone of voice, from how you carry yourself. Prepared. So do your homework. Be ready with those questions. Be ready with what questions they may ask you, and be yourself. So above all, people are going to be interviewing for culture. Are you going to be a good addition to their team? And so just remember, like, you want to be yourself, just like an extra notch up.
I love it. I love it. I think if you do all these tips that Michelle just provided you, you're going to get the job. So you do those three things right there. So I hope you all were taking notes. This was such good information, so valuable, and we will provide the link after this so that you can share it. And again, Michelle, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. And you have your coffee. Is it daily or weekly?
Weekly, yeah, caffeinated recruiter videos on LinkedIn.
Okay, so you can find Michelle on LinkedIn, the caffeinated recruiter, and she does little segments where you can get different tips about other things, and just does a fantastic job of covering things that we all need a little bit of help with. It's okay to see that, we all can do better. We all can be a little bit
Mhm.
more effective. So catch
Yeah.
Michelle on LinkedIn. If you all have any further questions or have any ideas, feel free to send them my way, and we will continue to have more conversations. But again, happy Hispanic Heritage Month to everyone. Hope you can celebrate, and thank you again for watching. We'll see you next time.